Well, hi everybody, and welcome once again to my video blog. Um, Today is very hot here in Montreal. It's 34 degrees Celsius. That's about 93.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, I don't have an air conditioner here because, it's only hot like this for like 2 weeks in the whole summer. So it's actually pretty hard to bear. Fortunately, I have ceiling fans. Apart from that, well, my surgery in Toronto, as you know, is booked. I have booked a very nice hotel, bus trips to go both ways for the surgery and back, and things are looking up pretty nicely. I think I might also be able to meet some trans people who are also on YouTube and who live in Toronto, So it's looking like it might be a fun vacation trip, and I'm really looking forward to getting it done. Things have been going pretty well in my life recently. I'm starting, to really begin working on my PhD thesis, and I feel like the project's got a lot of potential. And this other student who's working on a project with me is, quite good, quite skilled, quite motivated. And working with him is very pleasant so far. So, things are looking very, very good. But apart from that, today I'm going to speak about a pretty touchy topic, I guess, which are basically the things that can go wrong with your transition, the things that are very difficult in getting started with transition, or at least some of those things. I've been getting a lot of messages here on YouTube from people who are telling me, I'm a teenager and I want to transition, and I'm really afraid because I live at my parents', and if I ever told them, they would surely reject me, kick me out, etc., etc. And these young teenagers basically don't really know what to do about this situation. I think they feel really torn because, if you know anything about hormones, if you look at other trans people on the web out there, it's pretty obvious that if you're lucky enough to be able to start hormones when you're a teenager, you generally come out much more passable, and it can have some very positive effects on your transition if you can begin very early in life. I think it's much easier than later in life. So I think most trans people want to transition as soon as possible, and for teenagers who are now on the internet, and because of the internet being made aware that it is possible to transition when you're a teenager because other people are doing it, it's really hard to decide what to do. Some trans teenagers are actually very lucky because their parents are understanding and supportive. I actually have known several who have told me, I didn't think my parents would be accepting, but it turns out, I told them, and they're going to support me through this. They're going to help me transition. They're going to help me find a gender therapist, help me get hormones, etc., etc. But, of course, not everybody can be this fortunate. And I've also seen trans people who got kicked out of their parents' house, and this is potentially very difficult. You're thinking, a teenager whose parents are paying for their schooling, their high school or their university or college, and then they're kicking them out, and one day to the next they have nothing and they can't finish their education. They're in the street, they have to find a job immediately. Whatever job they can find is only going to be a low-paying job. And then if you want to transition like that, like you're 16, 17, barely surviving, working at McDonald's, the transition just makes things even more difficult for you because, people around you might reject you. And if you don't have any support from anyone and your finances are in a terrible state and you can barely afford hormones and you can't afford to consult a doctor, blah, 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 it makes things extremely difficult. And I think this is why a lot of young trans people end up going into prostitution. It's kind of the easy way out. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but you're put into a situation that's very uncomfortable, where you have very little money and no support, and the transition that you want to get done, it's something that's very expensive. And on the other side, you have people who, are willing to pay you to prostitute yourself, because there's always demand for that, especially for trans prostitutes. So, a lot of trans people end up doing that, or doing porn, which I think is less bad than prostitution, but still, not the greatest career choice. And, in the end, I think that a lot of these people can end up very unhappy, if you get into the world of prostitution, it's closely connected to the world of, drug trafficking and other crimes, and the people you're going to meet there are maybe not going to be super great, and you risk catching an STD or getting beat up, or worse. So, it's a very, very slippery slope, very dangerous path, which I think, trans people should try at all costs to avoid. So back to what I was talking about, when you're a teenager and you want to transition and you see that your parents could kick you out, what do? Well, to me, it's a matter of your own judgment. You, as as a teenager, have to be able to kind of judge what your parents' reaction is likely to be, Are your parents the kind of people who hate gays? They probably don't hate transgenders specifically, because society, doesn't really put us in contact with that many trans people. But do your parents hate gays? Do your parents dislike gays? How much dislike are we talking about? Do you really think it's likely that they would kick you out? Have they ever threatened to kick you out, If your parents have ever threatened to kick you out before, and they're that kind of people, I would say that you are in a bad position. And I would tell you that in the end, if your parents are conservative people who are unlikely to let you proceed with your transition and are just going to make your life harder, then you have no choice. At some point, if you want to transition, you're going to have to move out. You're going to have to live on your own and get your own freedom. The only way you'll be free is if you have your own roof, your own job, your own income, and that you don't have to rely on them for your survival, But, I don't necessarily think that moving out as soon as possible is the best option. Of course, if you're a trans person who, is in the middle of high school, I think it's very important to complete your high school. I don't think you should leave your parents' home and get a job and drop out of high school, because if you do that, you're going to potentially seriously damage your career prospects. Of course, it's maybe possible for you to come back to high school later on, but it's going to be much harder. It's just going to make your life more difficult in the end. I personally waited until after high school, and in fact until I was into university, until I felt like I was comfortable and safe. And I can tell you that already when you're in university, if you're a high school student, you're going to feel people are way more mature. Nobody has ever commented on me being trans in university. Nobody has ever made any negative remarks about the way I dressed or about anything that I changed in my appearance or what I was doing. Nobody even dared to ask me questions without me talking about me being trans first, basically. So I think people in university are way more mature, way more respectful, and it's a place that's generally pretty friendly, pretty safe for transitioning. And, unless you're going to one of those crazy, religious universities, if you're going to a big, major, well-rated university, you're going to probably find that, people just don't care. People don't care about your transition, and the campus authorities aren't going to let people harass you. They're going to protect you. They're not going to be tolerant of violence and threats made, against you or other students. And they'll intervene to protect you, So my advice to you would be, if you're in high school, if you think there's a fair chance your parents are going to be accepting, or if you're really sure your parents aren't not going to kick you out, then you might consider telling them. If not, then you might consider telling someone else. You know, a friend you can really trust, you might be able to tell. You know, it's not because you're not transitioning right now that you can't do anything about your transition. You can still spend a lot of time going on the internet, reading websites like Lynn Conway's website, informing yourself about transition, informing yourself about everything that you can do, informing yourself about hormones, talking to other trans people, even building contacts in your city with other trans people, and maybe even managing to go out as a girl every once in a while, you know, without your parents or family or friends knowing about this. If you're, you know, you just have to be careful. So basically what I'm saying is you can go a long way without actually taking hormones and without actually, you know, changing your life completely. You can go a long way in preparing yourself for transition. You know, I think those first steps, you know, getting to know yourself, getting to live as the opposite gender, you know, getting to know other people and to talk about this, and you know, to really be informed on the topic are maybe the most important ones in transition. And when you're finally going to have your freedom, going to have your own income, and you're going to begin transition, you're going to feel, you know, like you're ready and you really know what you want, and that's going to be much better. In my opinion, it's much better to feel trapped for a couple of years, you know, living with your parents until you're finished with high school and you're into university, or maybe even waiting all the way until after university if they're paying for your education. It's maybe much better to do that, and then at the end, you know, being safe and being able to do this on your own, than, you know, being in a situation where your parents kick you out and you have to deal with whatever happens to you and do whatever you have to do to survive, which might be very hard, very difficult, and in fact might delay your transition even more, you know, unnecessarily. And I think it's sad that so many parents are not accepting, you know, but sometimes, you know, it's very hard to change people. It's very, very hard to make them see, you know, what's good, what's right for you. But I think the best way you can do it is really to transition someday and, you know, give them a lot of time to come around. And when they see that you're happier living in your new gender, you know, they're going to understand possibly. You know, I've known some people who had very conservative parents who eventually came around and who, you know, are now, you know, pretty supportive. You know, it takes time. It can even take years sometimes. But I think most people do come around in the end. You know, most people are not stupid enough to just, you know, tell their children, I'm never talking to you anymore. Most people are not that cruel. But yeah, you have to be patient with yourself. You have to be patient with other people. And I know it's very hard when you're a trans person to not actually transition once you really realize that this is what you want. You know, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices in life. Sometimes you have to prioritize whatever is more important for your survival, for your mental health, you know, for your general health as a person. Because, you know, if your transition is going to ruin your life, you know, then that's not the goal. The goal of transition, you know, I think should be to be happier, you know, to be better off in the end. So that's pretty much what I had to say about this topic. You know, basically, you have to be courageous. You have to think about your own survival. You have to think about your education. Your education is extremely important, you know. And maybe try to think about it this way. You know, if you're a trans teenager and you're in high school and there's any chance your parents are going to fund you to go to university, what you should do is try to convince your parents that you really want to go to a university, you know, in a more liberal state. You really want to go to a university in New York State or in Washington or in California, you know, a place that's not conservative. You want to go to a big, nicely rated university or community college, you know, that's not in the Jesus Belt, basically. And once you're there, it's going to be much easier to find people who are supportive and to make contacts, you know, and to think about how you're gonna manage, you know, to survive on your own. You know, get a summer job, maybe even get an apartment of your own eventually, and, you know, just be free to express yourself. But I think it's just a matter of planning ahead, basically. And at some point, you're gonna make it, and you're gonna get there, even if it takes time. You know, I think it's hard for us, who transitioned pretty young. I started my own transition when I was something like 20, 21. And I think I'm still not done with it. I've been going very slowly. And I've wished so much that I could have, started taking hormones at like age 12 and be completely 100% passable from the very start, basically, and get to live my teenage years as a girl. And unfortunately, it's impossible to go back. But I'm realizing now that, a ton of people are starting to transition when they're more than 60 years old. A lot of people had to wait a lot longer than we had. And I think the best we can do as a community is to just inform people about, what it is to be trans, that it's not a disease, that it's not something that should warrant hostility, and we can just hope that in tomorrow's society, maybe people are going to be, more accepting, and, people are going to be more likely, basically, to let their children transition, or to at least support them through their questioning and all that. Okay, so that's it for today, people. Bye-bye.